Hi, my name is Gudrun from GE Designs, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make this adorable Snow Globe Mini Quilt with vinyl for the glass. Let's get started by making sure you have your pattern. This should be 3 pages, one with instructions, and then 2 pages of applique templates that we're going to trace. But before we start on that one, let's start with cutting our fabrics that we need to have cut, starting with our background piece. Background piece of fabric needs to be cut into a 8.5 by 10-inch rectangle. So I'm going to use my squared ruler since we just need to cut my 8.5 and then turn the piece to get my 10. This is the background for our snow globe. So there we have that. Of course, you can utilize the leftovers possibly. So setting this one aside, then we want to cut our border fabric. So this is a fat 1/8. But we also need to use this for the backdrop of our snow globe. So this circle here that says cut from pink. So what I want to do first is I want to just make sure that I have enough for that and then set that aside for the applique. And then I can cut my pieces for my border. So I'm going to cut, let's see, I'm going to fold this and cut 4 strips that are 2 inches wide. So I just make sure I have a little trim here. I have a line on my fold. 2-inch strips. I need 4 of them. 2 of these strips need to be 10 inches. And 2 of them need to be 8.5. So I'm going to stack up the 10-inch, quickly subcut those. And then do the same with my 8.5. So there we have our borders. So the last fabric we're going to cut is our binding fabric. So this is your fat quarter. I folded it in half, so I have a fold down here. I want to cut 3 strips to use for my binding, and depending on what you prefer for binding, I prefer a 2 1/4. So I make my cut through the 0 and then through my 4.5-inch slit. And then I'm going to slide my ruler so that now the raw edge here is lined up with a dotted line. And I'll make 2 more cuts through the 2 and then the 6.5. So I have my 3 strips for binding. Set those aside. We also need a 2-inch strip. So I'm going to line things back up. And from that 2-inch strip, we just need 2-inch squares, and we need 4 of them for the corners of our border. So I have this fabric layered in 2 layers, so making 2 cuts gives me 4 squares for the border. So that's all we need to cut. So if you want to go ahead and prep a little bit before we start doing the applique part, we're going to take our batting piece and backing and attach those. I used fusible, single-sided fusible batting, so I just ironed my backing onto the batting. So very easy because we're going to be doing the rest of this quilt as you go. Set that aside. And then you can go ahead and take your 8-inch border strips and sew these squares to each side. I know I'm skipping over steps in the pattern, but this is nice to have ready. We're going to sew these, and then we're going to go ahead and press them towards the border. So press them this way. So these are ready to go for when we can start doing quilt as you go. So take your pieced border strips and your other 10-inch long ones, set these aside alongside the batting and backing piece, and that's ready to go for later on in the process. So now let's get to our applique. So you will need a fusible web, which is many brands available. I like the light fusible web. So this is something where you have a paper side and then you have a glue side. So the first thing we want to do is trace all of the templates that we need for the quilt. So I have marked which fabrics, which color you need each thing. So it's nice to trace those things together so that when you fuse it onto the backing of the fabric, it's good to go. So here we have our large background of the snow globe. So you need that. And if you want to put the year on it, you can also put whatever words or anything on the snow globe if you want. This part here is from the darker pink fabric. So we're using this outside frame. And then from the inside, we trace these. We have our green one, which is going to be our little gift, and then the base from the green too. So how that works, just grab a pen and trace your unit. So I've done a couple. Then when you've traced them, I just cut them out a little bit larger than your the lines, so you have a little bit of a buffer. So this is the little gift. So I'm going to take my green fabric that I have for that, and I'm going to fuse that to the back side. So make sure whatever fusible web you're using to look at the manufacturer's instructions on how long and what heat setting you should have this on. Usually it's about 2, and you want to avoid any steam. So it will also tell you how long to fuse it. And so once you have it fused, let it cool a little bit. And then once you have everything fused like this, we just cut it out with scissors. I love my Karen K. Buckley scissors. They're nice and serrated, so give you lots of precision. And then they have those wonderful sharp tips that you can go into all the little nooks and crannies of the little pieces that we're using. So other things that are really helpful with some of these little pieces as you're peeling off the paper backing is a pair of tweezers. If you have tweezers, any kind of tweezers, I like to have those with me. So once you have now cut out the shapes, all the shapes that you need, then you're ready to start assembling. So I wanted to show you when I actually traced around the outside edge here, as I showed you here. So I have that cut out here. Here's my frame. That's all we're using. So the center of it, once we cut out the star, I just took the center to cut the ribbon for my block for my gift. I actually just used a ruler so that I can get really nice straight lines. So it was just under 1/4 of an inch, I believe, the width of it. So I just cut from that center strips that would be perfect for the ribbon on my gift. And I wanted to show you a tool that I like to use when we're doing layered appliques like this, fusible, and that is a Applique mat. So this is a silicone mat that you can assemble your pieces on. So that means I can fuse this on here, and it doesn't matter if it goes off. It's going to peel, the glue is going to peel right off of the silicone. So you can actually remove that paper backing and just place that on here. So I would actually remove my backing off of these. This is where the tweezers come in handy. And then I would just center this and let it extend. Center this right in the middle. And then I can take my iron and just gently fuse this in place. And then let it cool just a little bit, and then you can peel this off. And then I can use my scissors to just trim it to the length. And maybe I can use the rest of this for going across. Let's see. Yes, I can. So I can fuse this back this way. And so this is how I build my appliques in pieces, in units, and then we join them later on. So this gift is now ready to be layered with the rest of the appliques. So let me show you how the units that I have done so far. I've built my base applique, so starting with that base of the background for the globe, I place my gift and then the snow on the bottom layered over the gift, and then a little bit of the snowflakes. So this is all fused and ready to go onto my background. So one optional thing, if you want to put a vinyl, clear vinyl on top of your globe to make it look like it's glass and see-through, you want to trace that same size as the background you cut from the pink. So you want to just turn it to the paper side of the vinyl and then trace that circle the same. So that's going to be the same size as the background here. So now I have that cut out here, so this will be placed here right on top. So now that I'm ready to go right onto my background, I'm going to place my background piece here and center my units on. You can see I have layered the year here on my base as well. So first off, I'm going to take my globe applique, I'm going to center it. I'm just looking to see that it is centered all the way around. How this is going to get layered is this comes around the edge, and then the base goes here on the bottom. So I'm just seeing my positioning where things are going to be, because I want to have an even space here and here. So this looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and fuse this part first to the background. And once that is fused in place, I like to just move things around. You don't want to move the iron. Just hold it in place until you feel like you've layered and it's stuck to the backing, the background. I'm going to flip this over and just do a little bit on this side to make sure that that is nicely fused in place. So there. Next step would be to add our frame around the edge. But if you want to add the layer of vinyl, that is the time to place that one. So I'm going to place that. That goes underneath that frame. It should be the same size as the underneath frame or underneath base background. Then I'm going to take my frame and layer that along the whole outside edge, covering up the seams of the edges of the vinyl and that background. See how this looks. And once that looks good, one thing you want to do first is grab a piece of fabric and you want to layer that on top. You never want to put your iron straight onto the vinyl. And then we're just going to go around the outside edge. Not quite sticking yet, so you might want to hold this a little bit longer in place. So I'm going to keep working on that, making sure it sticks to that outer background on the edge. And so once I have mine stuck to it, we're ready to add the base of our snow globe. Now I'm just going to add my base here, making sure it is centered. That looks good to me. So again, I'm just going to put a little bit of fabric over so I don't go onto the vinyl to make sure. Cover that up and then fuse my base in place. So once you have everything fused in place, it is time to go to our sewing machine using our backing and batting fused together. And we're going to have to add a little bit of stitching here to hold this in place, but first we're going to attach the borders to our little mini quilt. So I'm going to take my backing and batting that's pasted together. I'm going to place this right in the center. You can measure this out if you want, but I know I have plenty of space here. And we're going to start by sewing the borders, the 10-inch long borders on each side. So what you want to do is just flip this over, right sides together, and use a walking foot on your machine, ideally. I'm going to pin this in place just so it'll stay put. And we're going to sew through the layers with our walking foot with a scant 1/4 inch seam. Sew on each side. So here, now I'm going to be very careful, fold this out so my iron is not going to go onto the vinyl. And other side. There, now I can add the top and bottom borders. Those were the ones where we pieced the squares to each side. So when we flip this on, these seams should fit perfectly here in between. The seams should nest right in the corners. Place my pins to make sure that that stays in place as I sew it. And the same on the top. And so we're going to sew these and frame our mini quilt here very nicely. Pressing this outwards as well. So once we have this pressed, before I trim this up and put my binding on, I like to do my decorative stitching. So you want to do some kind of stitching around your appliques. So I'm going to put in a little bit darker pink thread and stitch both on the outside and on the inside of the edge here. I may add around my base. If you want to, you can add a little bit of free motion quilting in here. Not necessarily needed, but you definitely want to stitch down the outer edges of the globe, and then of course the inside of the base. You can also go into the letters if you want to enhance those, whatever you decided to write in there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you how to trim it up and finish. So here I have my quilt finished. I used a tiny buttonhole stitch and did both the outside, and then I went the other way around and did the inside. So it really frames the bulb nicely, the globe, and I love the little reflection of the vinyl. So now I'm just going to trim this up, get ready to add my binding. So I like to use my rulers, my big rulers for that, so I can get a really nice square trim. This way I can make sure that I can have a line, so I'm getting good 90-degree corners. And now it's time to add the binding, and you can use whatever method you prefer. We have a nice binding video if you haven't done binding before. I do sew my binding strips together, double folded binding. I like to sew it to the back of my quilt and then flip it to the front and stitch it down by machine. I hope you enjoyed making the little quilt with me. It's so fun and easy to add all these applique features with just simple fusible applique. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.